That's right, those are some of the reactions you can expect to have as we figure out what is the spookiest, scariest game of all time in this room and board October Deathmatch. That's right, 30 of the scariest games to shiver your spine tingles are going to be facing off in a tournament to the death where only one game will emerge victorious at the end, and all the others will be burnt. They will spontaneously combust at the end of this video, and it doesn't matter if you turn the TV off, like The Ring, it's gonna come back on and you're gonna see me just, with more hair crawling out at you. So I would recommend not that, especially if you're watching on your phone, because it's a small space for me to crawl through. This is something I do every month, and this month's theme is appropriately spooky, scary games. But before we get into the rules of the tournament, I'd like to give a huge shout out to the sponsor of this video, IntoTheAm. That's the shirt I'm wearing right now, known for their skull shirts, and honestly, just really great quality shirts. IntoTheAm has sponsored this video and has given me an exclusive code to give to you to get 10% off any order. So they have a bunch of great graphic tees where you can get 3 for $60. They have a bunch of great non-graphic tees, basic tees, just plain colors where you can get 3 for $50. Or my personal favorite, go to their clearance section. They got a lot of good stuff, and you can still use my code SlipperyJim for 10% off in that clearance section as well. Honestly, I'm so thrilled that they want to continue sponsoring the channel because I love their shirts. I legitimately do. I don't see myself purchasing shirts from any other company moving forward because they're a good price and they feel really nice. They're good quality and they hold up even in the dryer as well. So go on over there, check them out. It is a relief and it is so nice to be able to do an ad for something that I personally was a customer of and still am a customer of, because I think their quality of material is just really good. And if you just wait around for the deals, you'll still get some cool graphic tees and cool patterns at a cheaper price, and cheaper now that you have the code SlipperyJim for 10% off. So thanks to IntoTheAm for sponsoring this deathmatch. You know what shouldn't be burned? All of their shirts, because they're such good quality. And I hear completely flame retardant, but you didn't hear that from me. That's not part of the ad. Anyway, if you're new to these death matches, I've been doing them since January over on our Patreon-only Discord, where we take a theme, all the patrons will vote on the theme of that month, and then every day we will pit 2 games against each other in a battle to the death where only one will move forward, and at the end of the month, we will crown our inevitable victory. And so they were very generous to you all, because I always do these recap videos at the beginning of the month for last month. So all through September, we were voting on the spookiest, scariest game out there so that it could be out in the world for October, so you know which spooky, scary games to get your hands on and which ones are going to be burned for all eternity. So let's check out the games. These are the contenders that are entering into the deathmatch. As always, in the first round, I'll describe a little bit about each game, so if they pique your interest, you can go and check them out yourself. And then, as the tournament progresses and we meet all the players, we can ramp things up until the excitement is burning hotter than the losing games. One thing I should mention is I'll be saying what the votes were, but the votes will be different depending on, who logs on to Discord that day, and also who uses their extra vote. We have an extra vote system where you can vote on a game and you can throw it an extra vote, and you get 1 per tournament, but if that game doesn't win and you've used your extra vote on it, you get to retain the use of your extra vote for another game. So it's only if your game wins do you use that extra vote and does it become expired. And this is kind of a fun way, I think, to let people voice their intense enthusiasm about particular games, and when they're really passionate, help push the passionate ones forward and let those other ones that nobody cares to fight for burn where they belong. So right now, as these are rolling by the screen, I want you to write in the comments below what your prediction is. Who do you think is going to take it all home, or what do you think the final 4 is? I mean, you don't have to write it if you don't want to. I understand typing it's hard. It takes a lot of energy when you'd want to just lie in bed and watch your stories. But I always think it's kind of cool to talk about and to see how many people get it right, to see what people are hoping for, And that's why I like doing these recaps as well, so that everybody can participate, and not just those who support the channel on Patreon. But if you're interested in getting involved in the voting action, there's a link to the Patreon below. That's enough time to look at the games. Hopefully you've picked your winner now, and let's get right into the deathmatch, starting with our first matchup of Zombicide versus Betrayal Legacy. And this is Zombicide 2nd Edition, and specifically Betrayal Legacy, because having played Betrayal and Betrayal Legacy, I think Betrayal Legacy is the better version of Betrayal. I think it's a little bit more streamlined, and there's a little bit more consideration of the scenarios because you won't get a completely unbalanced scenario, or rather an unfun scenario. It might be completely unbalanced, let's be real. But first, let's talk about Zombicide. If you're interested in the board gaming hobby, you probably have heard of Zombicide before. You control 6 heroes, and you will have to navigate the streets and these various scenarios as zombies pour out from every pore and every door, and you have to punch them in the head with your 3 actions and complete the scenario without everybody dying. That's Zombicide. Survive the zombie invasion, roll some dice, see what happens. Betrayal Legacy, or Betrayal at House on the Hill, Betrayal Legacy is founded on that same system where you enter a spooky mansion. Everybody, they're all friends. Everyone's a friend here. Nothing's going to happen. Nothing will go wrong as you explore the grounds and figure out the layout of the house. Rolling dice to see if you get spooked too much, or picking up powerful items that you then get to, in the Legacy version, write your family name upon so that everyone knows that your family found that hammer first. They're the ones who found it in that hole in the garden. Why you were digging a hole in the garden? Well, that's just part of the mystery. And then halfway through the game, there will be a traitor that emerges. Somebody will be possessed or something will happen, and that traitor will go off and leave the party and head home and read the rule book for their own special traitor rules, while everybody else figures out the survivor rules. And then you'll meet back together. You gotta come drive all the way back and see which team, either the solo person or everybody else, will end up victorious. That was a lot of explaining for 2 games that are fairly popular, but hey, that's what this first round is for. And it's interesting because Zombicide has had so many iterations, right? There's Green Horde, there's Black Plague, there's Zombicide in space, there's Zombicide in the Western world, there's Marvel Zombicide. Zombicide has become this huge system, but for this tournament, I wanted to go back to the basics of standard zombies and see how does that experience compare against potentially a spooky haunted house. And it was close. People can vote however they want. They can vote for whatever they think the best game is. They can vote for whichever they think is the spookiest game and deserves the title best spooky scary game of all time. And so it came down to a 15-13 vote. But it is actually Betrayal that moves forward, and Zombicide is extinguished from existence. I was expecting Zombicide to move forward here just based upon the popularity of the system, but I think the atmospheric nature of Betrayal helped push it over the edge and move on to the next round. Next up, we have the Night Cage versus the Hunger. Because what's scarier than 2 board games that start with the? That was written on a box somewhere, probably a 6-nimped box. The Night Cage is a cooperative tile placement game where you've fallen into this endless cage and you're walking around with your little candle, and every time you take a step, all the squares around you get illuminated, and it might illuminate a space where you can get a key, or it might illuminate a space where the gate to the outside is, or it might illuminate a space where there are some monsters who are going to zap everyone in a specific row as soon as they detect movement, as you freeze and hold the candle and have it flicker. And so you have to get all 4 keys and get to the exit together without the stack of tiles running out. The stack of tiles is in this sort of candle-shaped holder to represent your dwindling light. Now compare that to the Hunger, which is a race sort of game. You're playing these vampires who are running around the board trying to eat as many humans as possible and fill their deck up with delicious human bones. That's not what they do. But you eventually have to run out, kill some humans, and get a rose and return to your castle before sunrise. And so it honestly, the flow of it, I've never played it, but the flow of it gives me a very Clank vibe of running around, getting as many cards as you can that have the most points on them, and getting back to the start without getting burned once your timer's up. And so the more stuff you get into your deck, the slower you'll be able to move because it's cluttered up with all the human bones that vampires love to collect. And I was really pulling for the Hunger here, mainly because the Night Cage is my nemesis, and I think it's a bad game. I just don't find the decision-making space that you get in the Night Cage to be that interesting, and I'll be putting out a full review on it in the month to come, but it's been hanging over my head because I want to play it one more time, and I don't want to play it one more time. I've seen everything that I need to see about the Night Cage, and it's nothing exciting. But the thing that the Night Cage has that's going for it is the atmospheric quality again. There have been a lot of people who have talked about lighting candles and only playing the Night Cage by candlelight because you're creeping through the candle. And I'll admit, when I embraced that theme and when I only spoke in hushed tones and said, feel the night gets closer. The night is creeping in upon you. What will be revealed? Another empty passageway. It felt a lot more fun than when I was trying to actually play it as a puzzle, because as a puzzle, I don't think it's that interesting. As a vehicle to light candles and blow the candles out when your candle gets blown out and leaving you in partial darkness. Even the Kickstarter had these LED candles that they sent along with it. And I still see the appeal. I still don't see the appeal. I want The Hunger to move on. The Hunger just seems so funny to me. But again, it is the atmospheric quality and that something that provides a spooky ambiance that sends the Night Cage forward in a 15 to 10 vote. Let's keep it moving. I always do this. I start out talking so long about all these games, but I want to make sure that I give a good enough baseline so if you're interested, you can check them out as well, because that's what this is for. It's not about the tournament results. It's about talking and comparing a bunch of fun games. And two of those fun games, or presumably one more fun and more spooky than the other, are Abomination, the Heir of Frankenstein versus Last Friday. So Abomination, Heir of Frankenstein is a long game, a game that has been so long that the designer has actually adopted an official variant to make it a lot shorter. It's called the Igor variant. Basically in Abomination, you're going to be running around the town and collecting body parts so that you can build your own sort of Frankenstein's monster. The person who gets the best monster wins. Whereas Last Friday is a hidden movement game based upon all the slasher genre. There's going to be one killer who's running around and the campers don't know where the killer is, but they have to try to kill the killer before the killer kills the campers. How many campers could a killer kill if a killer could kill campers? Well, play Last Friday to find out. And this matchup touches upon two fun horror tropes, the Frankenstein and the slasher genre. And I wasn't sure which way this was going to go, but I own Abomination, so I was rooting for it to move forward, and that's exactly what it did, as it leaves Last Friday in the dust in a 13 to 10 vote. Next round, we have Claustrophobia 1643 versus The Others. And not the Nicole Kidman Others, but The Others, the Seven Deadly Sins. Side note, I remember seeing the Nicole Kidman The Others in school. I think we had like a sleepover night at the school, but we didn't actually sleep over. It was just like a later night, and then our parents picked us up. But I remember watching The Others and it being pretty scary, and so making up that I wasn't scared and haunted, I just would try to jump scare all the other people. You know, the people who I had crushes on. And we never ended up together, so don't scare the people you like, I guess is the moral of that. They only looked upon me with terror after that. Now, Claustrophobia is a miniatures-based game where one player will control a group of humans in the catacombs trying to get out, and the other player will control the unending horde of demons scraping their skin off. That's very scary. I think if we're going on pure terror level, I think Claustrophobia takes it in a landslide. There's nothing scarier than being underground trapped with a bunch of demons ready to rip your flesh off. Other than my ex-wife. But Claustrophobia had a lot of support in the Discord. People really liked this game. Essentially, you roll dice and then you'll allocate those dice to various actions. That'll depend on the efficacy of those actions, etc. And what I really think is cool about Claustrophobia and makes me excited to check it out is both these asymmetrical sides, that the humans are stronger, but the demons are more numerous, which is really cool. And the fact that it claims to take place in like less than an hour. That feels also really exciting to me, to have this sort of battle of wits between these two factions. Feels fun. And then combat will just be dice-based as well. A lot of dice rolling and a lot of special actions that you can do. But it's up against The Others, which again is a sort of two different factions, but the others is more of a one versus all. One player will play one of the 7 deadly sins. You get 2 in the base box. I think Pride and something that honestly I don't care about because I stopped listening after Pride. And so though that sin will take control of all the monsters on the board, and then the human players, whatever number they are, they'll control the same sort of number of characters. They'll run around the board and try to either take down the sin or complete a quest. Depending on the scenario, there'll be these different branching paths that you can take, and you have to make decisions at certain points in the game when things are triggered. Are you going to go for this endgame trigger, or are you going to go for this endgame trigger? And I think that decision is cool. Each character will have like 2 action tokens, and so there'll be like 6 actions that the characters can take, and then the sin will have like 4 reaction tokens. They get to choose when the monsters react and when they don't. And it's a fun puzzle. It's one of those games that I got for cheap, and I only got the base game, and then my friend Zach and I, we realized, oh yeah, we don't need all the extra minis. We could just print off all the extra abilities of all the other sins and have a full complete game in one beautiful little box, and that's exactly what we did. So this was a tough match. These are both very exciting games, and both really embody that like disgusting horror vibe. The scary, dirty horror. You dirty horror stories. But when the votes were cast, the others moves forward in a 13-8 vote. Next round, we have the Bloody Inn versus Final Girl. And the Bloody Inn is this very funny game. This theme of the game is that you own an inn, you're a family that owns the inn, and your goal is to murder as many people in your inn as possible without getting caught by the police. Why do you want to murder them? Well, if you treat them well, they can become a repeat customer. Or you could just murder them and take all their money now. Seems pretty obvious which way you want to go. So it's primarily card play. The guests will be represented by cards, and they'll turn up and show what rooms that they're in, and then they'll also have a stat on them that shows you how many of your own cards you have to discard to get them back. And sometimes you'll be able to manipulate how many discard and pick up as the game progresses, and you can kill the guests and bury them, or you can just, bribe them to do other different things and try to avoid the police who's roaming around the halls as well. So it seems fun. It's up against Final Girl, which is no stranger to this competition, and having a Discord filled with a lot of solo players, no stranger to even being talked about over the course of the last year. If you're unfamiliar with Final Girl, you'll get a Final Girl, a killer, and a location. You can swap in and out the killers and the locations depending upon the number of sets that you have. Each set will give you a new variance that you can mix and match in between, but you'll still need the core set to be able to play any of them. And you'll be at your location, and you'll have to move around the board doing sort of dice checks and upgrading your skills and seeing which skills you can take depending on what you roll, and trying to rescue victims that the slasher killer, whichever slasher killer might be, is running around the board trying to murder. And eventually you have to kill the killer, as the same slasher genre goes. Now, the slasher genre didn't move forward in last Friday, so I was expecting, with the funniness of the Bloody Inn's theme, that Final Girl would be finally out, or immediately out, especially because my inner monologue is generally represented by the face on the box of the Bloody Inn. Or rather, I thought it was a nice story that Bloody Inn represents the person who forgot that a new Kickstarter was arriving at his door. The third this week, and Final Girl represents what his spouse's face looks like when she finds that out. And so maybe the horror of that moment was what sent Final Girl forward in a 14-10 vote. Next round, we have One Night Ultimate Werewolf versus My Father's Work. And One Night Werewolf is Werewolf, but shorter. You have 5 minutes to murder someone around the table. One of them will be the werewolf. Sometimes 2 or 3 might be the werewolf. And if you're on the villager team, you want to kill a werewolf. If you're a werewolf, you don't want any werewolves to be killed. And if you're the tanner, well, you hate your life and you just want to die. I hear they're thinking about changing that character's name to Chris in a special version. I'm not sure why. Everyone will close their eyes. You'll do powers in the night. Open your eyes, try to murder someone who's not on your team. But is it spookier than My Father's Work, which has recently been fulfilling to backers from the famed knockoff JCPenney shirt designer T.C. Petty III? We have a game about a multi-generational abomination construction. You have notes from your father's previous experiences and experiments, and you have to continue on their work. Or you could go off and be an actor and start a YouTube channel, but then they'd just be disappointed in you. So probably better to do the evil scientist thing. But you also have to balance the science and experimentation, because at the end of a generation, well, all of your resources are lost because you die and you entrust it to the next generation to continue on your evil machinations. I mean, maybe it's not evil. Maybe these experiments, like most horrid science experiments, are because you want to save humanity. You want us to live longer, or maybe you just want monsters. Maybe you just want to make monsters and you're actually just horrendous. You want to have the most points by the end of the 3 generations. If you do, you're the best father, and you made it work, honey. And I love One Night Werewolf. I think One Night Werewolf is the perfect game to play around Halloween, and so I was expecting it to move forward, but I think the laughter around the table really set it back a few pegs, and it is my father's work that moves forward in a 20-8 vote. Very dominant vote. Next round, we have Resident Evil 3, the board game, versus Escape the Dark Castle. And so I put Resident Evil 3 forward as the title, but really it could be any Resident Evil game because basically all the board games are the same. They just have different characters and different scenarios, but the mechanics of the game are very similar. It's a cooperative horror survival game where you're going through doors, you're shooting down zombies, you're creeping through the hallways and trying to hold on to your last bullet, because if you miss, you're gonna get your face ripped off by a diseased, infected individual. Kind of like no. As you go along as well, there's always going to be this tension deck that keeps flipping over and seeing if you get got quicker than you normally are gotten. Now, Escape the Dark Castle is a game that I hadn't heard of before whatsoever. Normally when I'm creating these, once we decide on a theme, then my patrons will also submit games that they want to be in the tournament as well, and then we can all vote on them. And so this was one that I saw that I didn't know. And so into the bracket it goes. Basically, you're all prisoners in this dark castle. And so everyone has a character card and a custom character dice that's for their specific character, and they have traits like might, cunning, and wisdom. And so every game you're gonna work your way through this deck of cards, these chapter cards, and these chapters are sort of mini games that you all have to work together to decide what happens. Sometimes you'll be doing dice checks, sometimes it'll be a little choose your own adventure thing, various number of stuff. You're going to be collecting items, then you can use those items to help you get through the harder chapters. And this was a really surprising one to me. I thought just based around the IP, Resident Evil would have it by a landslide, whereas in fact it was more of a landslide than my father's work, and Escape the Dark Castle moves forward in a 20-7 vote. So take that, zombies. We ain't scared of you no mo. Unless we are, because next up we have more zombies with Dead of Winter versus Camp Grizzly. So Dead of Winter is a semi-cooperative game. I feel like a lot of zombie games are going to be cooperative in nature because there's going to be a zombie horde. Although Last Night on Earth is not. That's not in this bracket, but it's also not a cooperative. It's team versus team, so I lied to you. But that's just because I'm getting into the theme of Dead of Winter, where there might be a traitor amongst you working for their own particular gain. How's that for a segue? In Dead of Winter, you're going to have a team of survivors on your own little team, and you're all working together. And there'll be the main colony and 6 locations outside the colony that you can travel to try to search through various decks to get the items that you need to survive. It might be food, there might be tools to deal with various crises that are coming up, there might be scenario-specific things that you need to grab and commit to the scenario, and there might be also things that you personally need to get in order to win, because you only win if you've completed your secret objective, and that secret objective might involve you hoarding medicine. So if somebody's sick in your camp, well, do you spend that medicine that you've hoarded because you need it to complete your secret objective, or do you let them die, have the morale of the camp go down, and potentially everybody loses the game? I know what I would do. And it's use the medicine. I'm usually a team player in these sorts of things. Shame on you. How dare you think I would go the other way? I might go the other way. But it is up against Camp Grizzly, another slasher style game where you're taking on the role of camp counselors being stalked by a grizzly man, quite literally grizzly, named Otis, who has a bear fetish. Otis, who is not played by a character, unlike last Friday, Otis is controlled by AI. He'll roam around the outskirts of the board and he'll attack whoever he's closest to because, you know, he has unbridled rage. because bears kidnapped his whole family and then he tried to become one of them. I hope that doesn't happen to anyone we might know whose family has been kidnapped by bears multiple times over the last year and a half. And if he attacks you and you don't have anything to defend yourself, then you'll panic. If he attacks you and you do have something and you fend him off, then he'll disappear from the board only to reemerge later. And so you have to level up your own skills and be able to triumph over Otis as the game progresses. I'm scrolling through the Discord and I'm seeing I'm seeing that I made the same kidnapped bears comment in there because it's one of my favorite bits after Brandon, Zach, and I just started singing about it when we were playing games one day. And now it's become a permanent fixture in my own lore. But I also like that Rochelle, they said that they were slipping a list of names into a bear's mailbox. And that just made me really chuckle quite a bit. Obviously, I'm rooting for Camp Grizzly here, even with my trauma associated with bears. But it is Dead of Winter as the first zombie game to come out on top and move forward in a 15-10 vote. Sorry, Camp Grizzly. Honestly, Camp Grizzly seems very good. That might be on my list to check out. But here's two more that you might be interested in checking out. How about that segue? Yeah. Next up, we have the Snallygaster Situations, Kids on Bike, the board game, versus Arkham Horror, whatever edition you want. That's the official title. Arkham Horror, whatever edition you want. I like Arkham Horror, Oops, All Tentacles, I think the best, but, you know, they're all pretty good. The Snallygaster Situation is a game, again, a cooperative game. A lot of these horror games are going to be cooperative as you take on the big bad, but there's a little bit of a difference in player responsibility as one player plays a lost kid, aka Will Byers, and the other players play all the rest of the Stranger Things crew. And the lost kid will have to give clues as to where they are hidden on the map to their team, but their clues are also associated with how they move the monsters. So they're also controlling the monsters, how the monsters react, so they may want to give a subpar clue in order for the monster to not attack their friends as much. And I think that push and pull of the tension of being the lost friend and trying not to get your friends killed feels like a really fun one. And then when you find your friend, you have to take down the big bad and then you win. It's up against Arkham Horror, and I put forward the second edition because I've heard the second edition is better. And that's really just because I own the second edition. So yeah, it's better. Arkham Horror is this long, epic game where you will attempt to take down one of the old ones. They'll start in slumber, and you'll have to run around the area of Arkham, investigating different places, having encounters at different locations, trying to buff up your stats and get enough weapons while you deal with the horde of monsters that are spewing out of portals that pop up on the map. And in order to close a portal, you gotta go to the portal, jump in the portal, just have a peek around a bit, and then jump out of the portal and spend a certain number of tokens that you've collected to seal it away for good. And if you seal away 6 portals, the old one never wakes up. If the old one wakes up, well, basically you're screwed, but you have a chance to fight the old one and still win. It's pretty much a tie. You call it a tie. But then again, you've also taken down an ancient elder god, so I say we could call that a win if you're able to do it. And this was a close vote. I've never played Snallygaster Situation. I don't even think I'd heard of it before this one as well, but it seems really fun. It's again one of those that I'm interested in checking out. Arkham Horror I enjoy quite a bit. It's a long, epic game when you get to it, but it's fun just running around and getting items, and that's the core loop of the game. But it came down to a tie. It was 12-12. Right now when I check back, it's actually 13-13. But in the case of a tie, it is the game with the most extra votes associated with it that moves on, because it is people who felt more passionate about one particular game that push it forward into the next round. And so the game that moves forward is Snallygaster Situation, Kids on Bikes, the board game, aka the longest title in board gaming history, moves forward, and Arkham Horror is extinguished beyond all recognition. Next round, Cthulhu gets another chance in Deep Madness versus Ghost Fightin Treasure Hunters. In Deep Madness, it's another cooperative game where you head into a deep sea mining base that has been overcome by devastation, and you are investigators, as often Lovecraftian heroes are called, and have to determine what really was going on and overcome the madness and the monsters that are lurking below. And what's interesting about Deep Madness, and this is the discussion we were having in the Discord at that time as well, is that it's a dungeon crawler, but its narrative really shines. People were saying that it was really well written, the portions of story that you get as you progress through these scenarios. And it was a larger Kickstarter back in the day. I think 2018 is what someone was saying. And it's got all these different sort of modular scenarios that you can swap in and out. And another element of the game that you're going to have to contend with is the flooding. Because it's underground, some of the rooms will get flooded as the game goes on, and you have to navigate the rooms being flooded as well as the monsters and the goals of the scenario that you're pursuing as well. Now, Ghost Fightin Treasure Hunters, or as it was originally called, Geister, Schmazenmeister, Schatzentmeister, Schatzukmeister. And you wonder why I wanted to have it in the competition. This is a family game. This one would be great for kids. It is recommended in a lot of like good games for kids, so it's not going to be naturally that spooky. You have to search this house for 8 precious jewels and get out, basically. And I wanted to include it because I have heard good things about it, and I have heard that it is good for families. That also means that it's going to be taken out in the first round by the tentacles of the deep, naturally, as it cannot be the spookiest, scariest game out there. And Deep Madness moves forward in a 13-6 vote. 4 more, I think 4 more, and then we'll really get cooking into the second round. This is a reminder, if you haven't already, hit the like button, hit subscribe. Really helps me out, helps the channel grow, and helps me keep producing these sorts of things. Unless, of course, you want me to go away entirely, in which case, well, that's hurts my feelings, but hit the subscribe button and then wait 6 months, set an alarm, and then unsubscribe, and you really stick it to me. Seriously, it'll be devastating when I lose like 1,000 subscribers in the next 6 months just in one day. I'll forget that I even said this, and I'll forget that this was the reason. So if you really want to make me cry, that's probably how you do it. Moving on to Horrified versus After the Virus. And Horrified is another sort of pandemic-style cooperative game where you have to take down various monsters roaming the streets. This will depend upon the player count, but you have your classic monsters like Dracula, Frankenstein, and his Frankenstein's bride. Oh, actually, the doctor's name was Frank. Yeah, I know. We all know. Okay, he's called Frankenstein. Just deal with it until I do another one where I feel like being that person and saying actually. You have the thing that lurks in the water, whatever that one is. Swamp Man? I'm pretty sure it's Swamp Man. You have all these various monsters who will move in a different way and have a different sort of win condition, have a different kill condition, I should say. And you as the town members have to collect all the different items, protect the other various citizens, getting them from point A to point B, and be efficient with your actions to take people out. It's sort of a lighter game. I've never found it that. I've only played it once. I didn't find it like overly complicated, but I thought it was fun. I think it's a sort of a good gateway game for people who want to get spooky. But After the Virus is a game by Jacob Frixelux. He's the guy who created Terraforming Mars. And this is another zombie game. This one was included actually because, according to some of my patrons, this is Jacob Frixelux his best design. And it's a cooperative deck builder where your deck is actually invaded by zombies every time you shuffle. So you have to be quicker and quicker at searching for the things that you need. And you can play over 15 different scenarios in this sort of little campaign. This one says it's cooperative, but it actually plays really, really well in solo, which I anticipate will read pretty well with my solo-heavy Discord, I should say. There was a passionate plea from After the Virus fans that won a few people, but the strength of Horrified was too much to overcome as After the Virus succumbs to the virus and is horrified to learn that Horrified moves forward in a 17-11 vote. But if you like solo games and deck builders, this one actually seems pretty fun. This seems like one that I would be interested in checking out as well, because I also like cooperative deck builders. Next round, we have Furry Scott Bakula versus The Thing at Outpost 31. Fury of Dracula. Sorry. I don't know how that personal picture keeps on popping up in these videos. Fury of Dracula is a hidden movement game where one player plays Dracula running around the board and popping up and saying, ho ho, sucking blood and then disappearing and running around the board as well. It's a hidden movement game. Like most hidden movement games, you want to figure out where Dracula is and stab him with a stake. Now, juxtaposed with hidden movement, we have a hidden identity game in The Thing. The Thing is somewhere in the building. Someone might be infected. You have to run around the base and purge the alien infection before escaping to warn the others of what lurks in the dark. That is representative of this horrifying gif from The Thing movie. And because of that, Fury of Dracula moves on in a 15-12 vote. But if you like hidden traitor games, I hear The Thing is really good. I haven't played it, but I know I was talking to a few people, I think at Origins, who mentioned they had recently played a game of The Thing, and it was like one of the most intense experiences that they had experienced in a long time. They all needed to take a nice tea break afterwards. Was it Carly? Maybe it was Carly. Anyway, it doesn't matter because it's burned to a crisp and you'll never have to experience those horrors again. Next round, we have Mansions of Madness versus Mysterium. And both of these games have been in brackets before. Mansions of Madness is a scenario-based game where you're exploring the house, and it's now app-driven because this is the second edition that everybody loves and not the first edition that I have over on my shelf of shame that I am too terrified to open and too busy to figure out if it's even worth trying to adapt it in the second edition sort of manner, or trying to adapt the changes. And I know I've asked for that help before, and I've received that help, and I have also been too busy to implement that as well. So I'm sorry, and I am asking for help again. But you know Mansions of Madness, you've heard about it. Mysterium took down Sleeping Gods, and I think our cooperative deathmatch. That was very exciting, and I'm hoping for a similar upset now. It is cooperative Clue meets Dixit, basically. One player plays a ghost who is sending out these visions in the form of cards to indicate to all the other players their person, place, and thing, murder weapon, that might have killed the ghost. And if everybody gets their visions, then the ghost decides, oh yeah, it was this person who killed me, and has to give one last clue to get the group to focus and determine who the actual murderer was. It's a fun game. I say this all the time. Mysterium is one of those games where I have it on my shelf and I go, it's fine. And then I play it and I always enjoy myself. But unfortunately, I will not get to play it anymore because it's about to be burned as Mansions of Madness moves forward in a solid 16-9 vote. Which brings us to our last match of the first round, Blood on the Clocktower versus Bounce Off. And we'll get to Blood on the Clocktower in a minute, but I've got to talk a little about the most spine-curling, shivering-inducing, tingly game out there, the scariest game really, being Bounce Off. Because not only has Bounce Off been included in every single bracket thus far, and has presumably been burned, but it has come back to life every single time. It is the game that keeps living. It is the game that invades your nightmares. It is the game that you will think about on your deathbed. It will be the last game you see, and it will be there to welcome you at the pearly gates or the fiery pits of hell. Bounce Off is the immortal game. Bounce Off Spooky Scary Skeletons Edition has you not only bouncing little balls into patterns, it has you bouncing little skulls, which I heard as a rumor are actual skulls of, I don't know, probably voles. That would probably be around about the right size. Now voles would be a bit smaller. Squirrels? Yeah, it's getting dark fast. Not only that, Bounce Off Tales of the Crypt Keeper has you going to real-life cemeteries and throwing bones into newly excavated graves. I know. It's very rare you can find a game of this, but you can. Or at least that's what I heard on the news, and not from personal experience. Again, I'd like to give my official condolences to all the families affected by Bounce Off Tales of the Crypt Keeper. But the scariest thing about Bounce Off is that when I went to their dressing room to tell them that they needed to come out for their matchup, they weren't there. In fact, all that was there was a staticky TV that started glowing green the moment that I entered. And believe me, it gave me the spooks. And what even gave me more of the spooks is when a figure started to emerge from that TV. I turned around and I heard a voice call out, "Stop! Whose turn is it next?" And I turned around to see this box on the table. Bounce Off is no longer in this competition because, let's face it, it cannot be matched. Burning joke. No, it is Blood on the Clocktower versus the most atmospheric game of them all, Atmosfear. Which really should win this whole thing. Atmosfear, the VHS board game. Screw you, Blood of the Clocktower. We're not talking about you. We're talking about Atmosfear. We know Blood of the Clocktower. It's again one of those sort of mafia werewolf-esque games, but it's great because when you die in the first round, you still actually get to play the game and don't have to just sit in silence while watching everybody else play werewolf without you. So that's pretty good. But Atmosfear is, of course, the VHS board game. Nightmare, some may have called it. This is the Atmosfear, the Harbingers, which I think is the best version because it's the only version I've played. But this is the real-time game to end them all. You have 60 minutes to go out, get 6 keys, return to your starting position, and then draw from a little bin a scrap of paper that you've all written your worst fears on into the middle. And if you pull out your own worst fear, well then your fear overcomes you. But if you pull out someone else's fear, you go, ha ha, your fears are pathetic, and I have won. All the while being stopped mid-turn by a gatekeeper who's constantly shouting at you from the TV screen. It just is nostalgia and should not have had a new version, but I'm so happy that it did. And should not have cost that much, but I'm so happy that people paid for it because it now exists, still in its glory. I love the Gatekeeper, but unfortunately, it was a close vote, and this isn't a fake out. Blood on the Clocktower moves forward in a 13-11 vote, and Atmosfear, it's no more. I really wanted to play this last Halloween, and then I didn't because I thought it was going to be too cheesy. So, you know, that's fair. But I'm so happy that Atmosfear got to be the bounce-off reveal game, and I'm very sorry that it didn't manage to move further in this competition. So that's the first round. Now we're moving to the round of 16. We can really kick it into gear, starting off with our first matchup, Cthulhu Death May Die versus Betrayal Legacy. And you'll see this is a new game that we haven't talked about, Cthulhu Death May Die, because there's only 30 games in the bracket in order to make sure that we start on the 1st of the month and finish on the 30th of the month. Some games just get a random buy. And so for this one, it was Cthulhu Death May Die and Kingdom Death Monster over on the other side. Cthulhu Death May Die is by Come On. It was recently just announced that they're doing a 3rd season, and everybody's going bananas for it because they know it's going to be very expensive and they can get lots and lots of plastic, and that's what we love to do in our hobby instead of playing games. No, I hear it's really good. It's scenario-based. You start the game insane, and while your end goal is to inevitably shoot Cthulhu in the face, this is the actual description on Board Game Geek, which is just beautiful. And so basically each scenario will take place of you summoning an elder god and then trying to kill that elder god. It's up against Betrayal Legacy, the atmospheric, spooky exploration mansion, and I wasn't sure which way this one was going to go. I thought Cthulhu would end up taking it out because there's been a lot of buzz around the game. People seem to really enjoy it. And Betrayal is fun, but it's kind of only fun around Halloween or when you're willing to like dive into that spooky atmospheric. But it was really close. It was a really close vote. It was 16-13, but it was Cthulhu Death May Die that just edges out the competition and moves forward in that 16-13 vote. Let's move on to the Night Cage versus Abomination. I am actively rooting against the Night Cage here. The Night Cage is my least favorite game in this tournament, and Abomination is cool. It's really cool. And I say this having not played it, but being told that by Zach, who I made read the rules and learn it so he can teach it to me later on this week. So I can't have Abomination go. I need the Night Cage to go. And it came down to a tie. It was 14-14 and there were no extra votes cast. And so I let the voting happen for a little bit longer. And so of course, by doing that and with me expressing my distaste for the Night Cage, somebody switched their vote from Abomination to the Night Cage, and it is the Night Cage that moves on in a 15-13 vote. Very close. Again, it is this atmospheric quality. Where that was with Atmosfear, I don't know, but it is this atmospheric quality that helps propel things forward. And I get it. When you want that ambiance, right? You want this game to provide you with that spooky ambiance where you feel like everything is against you, or at least that's probably what I would be voting for as well. And speaking of spooky ambiance, well, we have The Others versus Final Girl. The Others, again, is this disgusting, sin-dripping game of dirt and grime, and Final Girl is you, just alone. I mean, that's the scariest thing of it all, right? That's just being alone. That's, I certainly don't have any experience with that. I'm not scared of that at all, he says to his camera. Yeah, being alone and taking down the slasher killer, whatever killer that might be. And so if I were to have to vote here, I'm not much of a solo player, so of course I would vote for The Others. The Others is a really solid game. If you like Come games, if you like CMON games, if you like monster games, The Others is pretty fun. But Final Girl has gotten a lot of buzz, understandably so, and the variation is fun as well. And I think the mechanics behind Final Girl look pretty cool as well. So if you like solo games, definitely check that out, especially because it moves forward in a 15-9 vote. And The Others, they're gone. Next round, we have My Father's Work versus Escape the Dark Castle. And this is an interesting one to me because I actually didn't expect Escape the Dark Castle to move forward in the first round, and so I'm not expecting it to move forward in this second round as well. And My Father's Work has, again, been getting a lot of buzz. That is pushed forward, I think, by it being a more recent release. We'll see if in 10 years of this deathmatch stands the test of time and the hype for My Father's Work still exists, or if it has faded into obscurity. But it hasn't faded just yet. And it is My Father's Work that is going to be moving on in a 16-10 vote. And I'm great with this decision. I think Escape the Dark Castle looks fun, but it also feels like the minigames might be not that exciting after a while, just based upon the mechanics that they talked about. Whereas My Father's Work is a bit more of a chunkier game, and for my preferences, well, I'm interested in chunky. I'm a sweet little chunky boy, what can I say? So I'm happy with My Father's Work moving on into the quarterfinals. Now next round, we have on the other side of the bracket, Kingdom Death Monster, our bye for that side of the bracket, versus Dead of Winter. Kingdom Death Monster, again, has been in this bracket before. It should be no stranger to most of you. It is this large, epic skirmish game where you will attempt to take out all these beasts and monsters and then return home and level up your stats and build out your village a bit. It takes place on sort of a square grid, moving things around. Townsfolk Tussle has also been spoken of akin to Kingdom Death Monster, and I like Townsfolk Tussle. I think the skirmish aspects of that are pretty fun, but Kingdom Death Monster is also known for being very dark and very difficult and very unforgiving. But it's up against Dead of Winter, which has a zombie horde and has a crossroads system. That's actually one of my favorite parts of Dead of Winter, is that on your turn, the player to your right is looking at a card, and if you trigger what the card says, then you get to read a little chunk of story and make a decision that sometimes will benefit you, sometimes won't. Sometimes everybody gets to make that decision, sometimes only you get to make that decision. I think that's such a cool system that I haven't seen in a lot of games, and I think it's cool to highlight that, especially if Dead of Winter won't be moving forward, or even if Dead of Winter will be moving forward. And there was a big push from Kingdom Death Monster fans in the Discord. Then there was a big push back from people who said, I'm voting for the game that doesn't cost $3,000, which, you know, it's fair. It's expensive. It's not that expensive. If you were to get everything though, it can run you a lot of money. It's like $450 for the standard base game. Some people voted for Kingdom Death just based on the scare that the price tag gave them. Some people like Dead of Winter more than Kingdom Death, but voted for Kingdom Death because they thought the theme itself is very spooky. It's a lot more dark, a lot more brooding, and really I'm just trying to make the Kingdom Death fans feel better before I tell them that Dead of Winter moves on in a 17-13 vote. Next up, we have the Snallygaster situation versus Deep Madness, and I'm pulling for Snallygaster situation here. I think Snallygaster is the one that I am the most interested in personally. I want Snallygaster to win this whole thing because if it does, I will go out and I'll purchase a copy of it and do a review on it probably, you know. It's one that I feel is unique enough to add to a collection, and the promise that it makes of the push and pull between the Lost Kid and all the others feels fun. Unfortunately, there's only 4 scenarios, which lessens its replayability a little bit, but you can keep playing those because you're going to be in different locations. All that to say is Deep Madness who? It is the Snallygaster situation. Stranger Things the board game that moves forward in an 18-7 vote. Let's keep it going. I want to just keep talking about these games, but I've already talked about them enough already, and we just need to get to the results. Horrified versus Fury of Dracula. Horrified wins! Well, no. Well, it does, but it was really close. I think Fury of Dracula is spookier. I think objectively Fury of Dracula is spookier than Horrified. Horrified's, it's got too many colors. It's too bright and not brooding enough. I think Fury of Dracula really embodies that brooding nature, especially with Dracula disappearing or changing into bats or wolves and running around the board and not knowing where Dracula's going to strike next and the hunter's trying to track them down. I think that is scarier. But Horrified is a really accessible game, and it's got 5 monsters instead of just 1. It's got Dracula in there, 5 times as spooky. That was one of the arguments that was happening. And it was really close. It almost came down to the roll of a dice. Some people, when they can't decide, they put in a little dice emoji, and so I just roll the dice and assign a random vote to one or the other. But it eventually was Horrified that manages to just edge out Fury of Dracula in a 16-14 vote. Next round, we have Mansions of Madness versus Blood on the Clocktower. Mansions of Madness, this brooding, scenario-based, app-driven game like we talked about and have talked about so many times by now, and we'll be talking about more very shortly, versus Blood on the Clocktower, which is a giant, big social deduction game, and I really enjoy Blood on the Clocktower. I like whenever I play it. I think it's got a good essence of social deduction as long as you have a storyteller who isn't selfish. I think it can be a very sort of selfish game if the storyteller just, makes everybody drunk and doesn't work to balance the game as it happens, which has only happened to me, a couple times. I've seen it being played with great storytellers, and the one I did at Origins, she was a great storyteller in terms of managing such a large group. Yeah, I like Blood on the Clocktower. I like social deduction. I think Blood on the Clocktower is a great take on the genre, although I think it is too expensive for what it is. For me, I'd just as well play Avalon as well, which doesn't incorporate any player elimination. I think that does it very well. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about how horrible Blood on the Clocktower is, because it is certainly not the spookiest game out there. Who cares about demons murdering people in the night when you have a whole house full of insanity? And Mansions of Madness moves on in a 19-10 vote. On to the quarterfinals, starting with Cthulhu Death May Die versus The Night Cage. And I think everyone's playing a cruel joke on me. How could The Night Cage triumph over Cthulhu Death May Die? Come on, shining jewel of a game that they're putting out a 3rd season of. It would be inexplicable for Candles to triumph over madness, over monsters, over ghouls. Oh, they're kind of ghouls in The Night Cage anyway, so I take the ghoul part back. I know that you can't believe it, and I certainly can't believe it. And I've faked you out completely, and it is Cthulhu Death May Die that finally triumphs over The Night Cage. But it was close. It wasn't a blowout. It was 15-10. It was 15-10 the vote. And I'm very happy that The Night Cage does not make it to the quarterfinals when I really thought it would. Even just being forced to talk about it as much as I have makes me mad. But it's out of the competition. Cthulhu Death May Die moves on. Next round, we have Final Girl versus My Father's Work. And this one, I'm giving the edge to My Father's Work. I think Final Girl is well liked, but I don't think it's spooky enough to really capture the spirit of the Deathmatch. I think My Father's Work does that with its intergenerational saga of pain and torment. Just a casual generation-long saga of death and despair. No big deal. Failed experiments and inhuman suffering. But people love Final Girl. Final Girl didn't get its due way back in the solo deathmatch last February, and people are hungry for more. People want more Final Girls. Well, there can only be one. That's kind of the premise of the game. And even though there were a lot of extra votes being pushed forward for My Father's Work, it is Final Girl that moves forward in an 18-14 vote. Next round, we have Dead of Winter versus the Snallygaster situation. And Dead of Winter has taken out some pretty substantial opponents, especially knocking out Kingdom Death Monster in the last round. But my heart wants Snallygaster situation to win. Although I think with the strength of its run so far, Dead of Winter has a lot going for it. I was unsure about which game would emerge. I wanted Snallygaster situation to emerge. I thought Dead of Winter would emerge. Well, one of those two moved forward. No, sorry. It's the Snallygaster situation that manages to overcome Dead of Winter in a really close 14-13 vote. Stranger Things moves forward. Honestly, I think the strength of Stranger Things, their last season, also is helping propel my personal interest and probably some of these votes. But Dead of Winter is cast aside, is turned into a zombie, and Snallygaster Situation also moves forward into the quarterfinals. And vying for our last spot, we have Horrified versus Mansions of Madness. And again, this was one where I thought Horrified would move forward just based around the conversation it was having in the Discord, and that Mansions of Madness would be upset. Both the game would be upset as in sad, and then upset as in it was an upset out of the competition, because people really do love Horrified. I don't personally see the appeal, but I've only played it one time. I played it at a Niagara board gaming convention once, and it was fun. It was just a little bit too simple for my taste. But between the two, I would also probably vote for Horrified, just because Mansions of Madness does have a spookier vibe, right? It's got a spookier atmosphere, and as we know, atmosphere is very important for people to remember. And so the vote was 16-12 for one of these games. And the game that is moving on into the quarterfinals is Mansions of Madness pulls it out in a 16-12 vote. So we have our final four. We have made it to the final four. Thanks for sticking with me. Thanks for being here. Hopefully this has been entertaining. Our final four contestants are Cthulhu Death May Die, Final Girl, Snallygaster Situation, and Mansions of Madness. A good final four. I don't know what I was expecting going into the tournament. Are your picks still here? Honestly, and I will be completely honest about this, I was expecting Atmosfear to be in the final four. I thought everyone would get on board, mainly because look at these imploring eyes. I mean, you just can't say no. Unfortunately, it's not Atmosfear. The rules are in a comic. All right, enough of Atmosfear. I'm sorry, you're gonna be burnt. Yeah, I gotta play this Halloween. I really gotta push that forward. Enough about Atmosfear. Let's move on to the final four. Let's see who is going to be crowned the spookiest, scariest deathmatch winner of all time. And this is definitive. If anybody asks you what is the scariest game out there, you must answer with one of these four to be determined very shortly. But first, we're figuring out between Cthulhu Death May Die versus Final Girl, which of these two will enter into the finals. Scenario-based Come miniatures game versus simple, solo, lonely little puzzle. Alone in the woods against a murderer. It's up to you to come out on top. And Cthulhu Death May Die was in the finals for the cooperative deathmatch. It eventually lost. Spoiler alert. So I am assuming that Cthulhu Death May Die will move forward and that Final Girl eventually will be out. Also because look at the two covers, right? We've got a big scary monster versus, well, Cthulhu. And and with that in mind, it may make sense that the bloody, battered Final Girl still has some fight left in her, and Final Girl moves forward into the finals and upsets Cthulhu Death May Die in a 17-12 vote. It wasn't close. I mean, it's respectable, but it wasn't like a razor-thin margin, and I am shocked. I thought Final Girl was going to be out in the quarterfinals, maybe even the round of 16, and here they are in the finals against one of the next two competitors, the Snallygaster Situation versus Mansions of Madness. And I am rooting for Snallygaster Situation. This is almost there. I think if Snallygaster gets into the final, they can overcome Final Girl. It feels like they can topple them, no problem. They just need to overcome this one stupid little house. As the Kate Bush songs play in the background, no, not the one you're thinking of. We're thinking of Wuthering Heights. Heathcliff, it's me, I'm Kathy. I've come home and I'm so cold. What's scarier than that? We are hoping and we are praying that Snallygaster Situation moves on forward, but unfortunately, the hill that they were running up is too high and too long and too tall to surmount, and they go tumbling down that hill. And Mansions of Madness defeats Snallygaster Situation in a 14-10 vote. Very close, closer than, well, yeah, closer by one vote. 4 votes in the difference versus 5 votes in the difference. But Mansions of Madness is sent forward into the final round. And so we have our two finalists, Final Girl versus Mansions of Madness, the second edition. Final Girl Season 2, let's call it. Any of the Final Girls would work because there's 10 possible combinations. Only one of these games represents the spookiest game that the world has to offer. Only one of these games will emerge victorious and unscathed, and the other will burn in the fiery pits of deathmatch hell for all eternity. You will be ghosts of your former past. You'll go to reach for the board game on the shelf, and your hand will pass through it because, yes, it was a ghost this whole time. Only one of these games can survive the solo-only game of saving the hostages and taking down a killer before your own health points get gone, or the scenario app-driven game by Fantasy Flight, the improvement upon the system where you explore and try not to die. It would be such a lovely bookend to end with a mansion as we started with a haunted mansion with Betrayal Legacy. I can tell you that the vote was 16 to 10. Pretty significant win, but not overly dominant. And I can definitively say that there is one thing worse than being alone in a haunted house. It's being alone in your own house, facing off against a ruthless killer. It is Final Girl that wins the deathmatch in a 16 to 10 vote. Congratulations, Final Girl. You are the Final Girl. You have emerged victorious. Your whole story arc is about triumphing over one villain at a time, and that is exactly what you did. It stuffed Bloody Inn under the floorboards. It sinned harder than all of the others and left them battered and bruised. It took down the multi-generational foe of my father's work, punched Cthulhu, shot Cthulhu in the face, and eventually triumphed and burnt Mansions of Madness to the ground, walking away in a blaze of glory. Those are some spooky, scary competitors, and it is Final Girl that emerges victorious as the spookiest, scariest, spookiest game of them all. Definitively, this is what it is. It's definitive. That's how it is. I'm sorry, I don't make the rules. But what I do know is that all of your games are burning right now, and hopefully you put them in that fireproof bin so that your entire home doesn't go up in flames. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Congratulations to Final Girl for being the champion of this deathmatch. If you're interested in getting in on the action and voting, every day we have a vote over on Discord, which is accessed through Patreon. If you throw a couple bucks on Patreon, it helps support the channel, helps support me continuing to spend all the time that I do on these sorts of videos, and helps the channel grow as well. And you get to be a part of a fun Discord community where we get to talk about fun games every day. Every day, every day. And if you can't afford it, that's completely no problem at all. I appreciate you being here. Thank you for clicking the like and the subscribe button. That means the whole world to me. And that is why I do these recaps as well, so that even if you can't afford it, everybody can still participate in the fun after the fact. Our next month's tournament is going to be the Shelf of Shame, which the recap will be coming out at November. Everybody submitted their Shelves of Shame, and we are seeing which is the most shame-producing, or which game should you get off your Shelf of Shame first. And the rule for the next month's tournament is that normally all the games that lose burn, but these ones will only burn if they remain unplayed. Pretty good deal for all of those involved in the deathmatch. Get them off your shelves or they'll be burnt for all eternity. Thank you so much for sticking around for these longer videos. Again, I appreciate you all. My name's Chris George. I don't have a catchphrase, but I do have a spooky skull on my shirt. And don't forget to check out IntoTheAm. 10% off using code name SlipperyJim. Thanks everybody. I will see you in the next video. Get ready for the jump scare in 3, 2, boo. Gotcha. Okay, that's enough.